Hey, how's it going, beer tubers? Ryan here. Just got back from the National Homebrewers Conference, which was held in San Diego this year, and had an awesome time. First off, I'd like to thank the guys at West Coaster, Mike and Ryan. They got me press passes to go down there. I went Friday, Saturday. The conference kind of started on Wednesday, and then the main 3 days were Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. So had an absolute blast. So I'm going to use my brand new bottle opener from Sierra Nevada that I got in my little swag bag, and get some Stone IPA going. Now the conference had a lot of seminars and had a lot of homebrew on draft. There were some homebrew clubs from all over the country that came to it, showing off their beers. They had one room showing off homebrewing equipment, vendors and that kind of thing, along with pretty much unlimited beer. Be at homebrewers, breweries, it was fantastic. It had a ton of beer each day. Here's the program. The theme was kind of like Some Like It Hoppy from the movie Some Like It Hot, but with the hop theme replacing hot. Going over what I got to do, starting on Friday, the first seminar I went to was fermentations using wild yeast and bacteria from Rod Todd. Rod Todd is the founder and head brewer. I don't know what he is these days, but he founded Allagash in Portland, Maine. So fantastic brewery. They do a lot of wild ales with just Brettanomyces yeast, ales with bacteria. They're also one of maybe one or two breweries in the U.S. that are actually doing open fermentation beers. So we talked about that. I believe Odell might be the only other one that's actually captured wild yeast to ferment their beers. And so they're going to start putting out more of these wild open fermentation beers out soon from Allagash. Fantastic talk on like temperatures to use for these yeast, what they do at Allagash, and just the fact that he was telling homebrewers that yes, you can do this on a homebrewing scale. In fact, it's easier to do on a homebrewing scale because you're not at a big as risk as some of these larger breweries, although Allagash isn't very big. Next up was historical stream beers. That talk was done by Mitch Steele, the head brewer of Stone, but I'll get to it later. He has a new title now. He mainly took a look at British beers because while there are examples of German and obviously a ton of Belgian beers, German being the icebox, Belgian is pretty much most of their beers. Stone, they focus more on the British styles, and kind of is their sort of base. And Mitch did a lot of research going over to the UK, checking out historical records. He mentions all that. He talked about some of the odd brewing procedures they did, like taking wort from a mash and then circulating it back into the mash for second massing. So instead of using fresh water, you actually use wort to mash in again. And then, or you can take that wort off of that grain bed, add that wort to like a fresh grain bed, and just produce like higher ABV beers, kind of how they did it back in the day. And just talk was kind of the evolution of all of that. He's also coming out a book on historical IPAs that Greg mentioned. There's going to be some interesting info. I guess there's some misconceptions about the beer. Next up was the keynote address from Vinny of Russian River. Very interesting. Vinny actually started out in San Diego. He was part of the homebrew group that's still going right now, Quaff. And he started out in San Diego and moved up to Temecula, which is just outside of San Diego, up north. Started up Blind Pig Brewery. Eventually got out of that and moved up to Northern California and got into the wine business. Kind of got with Corbell, who was trying to get into the beer business. That's kind of how Russian River started. So he's talking about just his life as becoming from a home brewer to a professional brewer. Where Russian River's going. They had 3 beers that they're serving, and I should mention, like, pretty much almost all of these lectures had beer flowing. You're drinking beer during these lectures for the most part. Anywhere from 1 beer to 4 beers, although a couple didn't have any. But for that, the ground hall, they're serving Pliny the Elder, I think it was their Janet's Brown Ale, which was kind of like their home pro-am beer. They kind of brewed with I guess a well-known home brewer up north. The third one was a very interesting beer. This is Happy Hops, I believe was the name. It was a pale ale. He was using a new experimental variety of hop. It's not being grown for commercial use yet, but they're working on it. It's a kind of a West Coast-ish kind of hop variety that has like big fruity notes, like apricot. What else? It had like berry notes, like maybe into like a blackberry, cranberry kind of note to it. Just an interesting variety that he was showcasing in this beer. So I'm looking forward to seeing if that variety comes around. It sounds almost like some of these New Zealand hops that you hear about. So I'm really curious to see how that one comes. Next up was Unusual Wood Aging. That was with Wayne of Cigar City. Cigar City uses a lot of non-oak wood aging in their beers, and it was kind of interesting to learn from Wayne that they mostly use the oak spirals. They don't really barrel age anything. They just do short contact time with wood spirals in their beers. He used Spanish cedar. He's also using lime wood and grapefruit wood because he says the properties of the fruits kind of transition into the wood, and so there's another way of getting those characteristics into a beer. Also maybe some slight sourness into the beers without using bacteria. So that was pretty interesting. Next up was non-sour barrel aging with Tommy Arthur of Port Brewing in Lost Abbey. He talked about how the role of oak and oak barrels with aging beers and the properties of oak and the chemicals that come out of the wood, different, charrings and all that kind of stuff. So the brewers during that talk they were pouring out were huge. He put out Older Viscosity as an example, 12.5%. Then we moved into Ad Lib, which is a blend between their Midnight Expressions dark lager, some barrel-aged Serpent Stout, and I'm trying to remember the other beer. There's one more beer they blend into it, special anniversary blend they did. Finally got to try it. It's called Ad Lib. And then the third one, he broke out Deliverance, which is the blend between Angel's Share and Serpent Stout. So I mean, there's like monster beers during that talk. Thankfully, that was the last one that day. Later in that night was Club Night. That's where all the homebrew clubs came together, showcased their beer. Everyone got to vote. I gotta say, Quaff in San Diego, they do some phenomenal beers. Got to try Ken Schmidt, who won the Stone Homebrew Rally a couple years ago, and he brewed a coconut macadamia nut coffee porter. And the version he had that last night was utterly phenomenal. Like, such awesome coconut character on it. It's like 9.2% porter. Phenomenal. Some of the other Quaff beers are fantastic. Checked out most of the local stuff. North County Homebrewers Association, which is probably a group I need to join because they're just a city over from where I'm at. There's a few other San Diego groups, but I mean there was groups from Northern California. There were some guys from New York, all over the country there. And there were some really good beers and there were some really not so good beers, unfortunately. I was a little disappointed in that respect. Thought we'd have a little better showing, stuff that I wouldn't have to drain pour, but oh well. Saturday started off with Hopping in the Sunset. Charlie Bamforth wrote a book called Beer is Proof That God Loves Us. I haven't read that book yet, but I heard it's really good. The dude is he's from the UK, came over like 12 years ago. He's a professor at UC Davis. He talked about alpha acids and hops, and kind of talked about the balance between the different chemicals, and talked about like with IBUs. I mean, you can have a certain IBUs, but the perceived bitterness is based on these isomers and all this chemicals, and the balance of the hop kind of teeter-totters. So one is more perceived bitterness and one's lesser perceived bitterness depending on these chemicals in the hop. So that was pretty fascinating learning about that as a home brewer. Because a lot of times you see like, oh, this is a 100 IBU beer, but you're like, it's not very hoppy. Well, I mean, there is a reason from that. And there are 100 IBUs in there, but it's because of the malts and the different chemicals that came out of the hops that are in there. So next up was High Gravity Brewing, Patrick Brew of the brewery. course, the brewery does some massive beers. They do 14.5% anniversary beer. That day they're pouring Cotton, which is their second anniversary beer. Yeah, it's early morning. You're drinking a 14.5% beer. It's pretty crazy. But he was talking about how to brew a beer like that using just malt, no adding sugars. Unlike Black Tuesday, which you talked about, which is their 18.2% imperial stout, they actually do feed sugar to that beer to get up to that level. So he kind of talked about like dealing with these really high gravities and just basically how the yeast gets really stressed out. So just getting you like the way of adding oxygen and nutrients to the yeast to kind of keep it going so it doesn't stall your fermentations. After that, I went to the Art of Hobby, which is the title of Peter Zion's seminar. Peter bought AleSmith back in 2002. He was a home brewer. He joined Quaff, which I keep mentioning, big homebrew group in San Diego. He eventually became a certified Grandmaster BJCP judge, beer judge certification program. So I believe he said he had the second highest score ever on that test. So the guy knows his beer. AleSmith, all their beers are fantastic. Nothing's below a B at all. I mean, most are B plus or higher beers. He went kind of a philosophy of home brewing, kind of tied the passion of home brewing with doing other interests, other hobbies. And one of Peter's new hobbies is cheese making, and that plays really well into beer because beer pairs really well with cheese. So he's hoping to open up Cheesesmith, his new creamery, in addition with AleSmith. And I guess one of the cheeses talked about maybe using some of the beer in the cheese. Also, he announced that Speedway is going to be getting different treatments because that's a big coffee imperial stout. They're going to start using different coffee roasts in these beers and do single coffee because these are a blend right now of coffees from Ryan Brothers, local roaster. They're going to start doing specifics, so we might see the Weasel version of that coming out soon. Let's see. After that was collaboration beers with Greg Cook of Stone. Greg's always entertaining. I had a bit of a production going with that one. I don't know if there's going to be any footage out there. Unfortunately, I didn't shoot any video. There'll probably be some pictures. Megaphone, for sure he was using. Some crowd surfing at the end. Typical Greg, kind of gets you all fired up about craft beer and just the other passions he has. And he's talked about with the beers they've collaborated on and how collaboration is such a very important part of brewing, especially like home brewing, when you're learning about the process. Last talk I went to was workshop on American hops. That was Matt Brynildson from Firestone Walker. If you've watched my channel, you know I'm such a huge fan of Firestone Walker and their beers. I would have loved if he had done a talk on the barrel aging process. He might have, like on Thursday, but I wasn't around for that. But he just talked about American hops and kind of where they've done production. He got more into the oils of the hops as opposed to the alpha acid components that add to the bitterness, and talking about flavor profiling, which Sierra Nevada has done extended research on different hop varieties. They pretty much took their pale ale base, did a Magnum's really clean hop, very low flavors. So they used that as their base beer, just Magnum, and then they just added, I think they did 10 different varieties to compare, and they looked at the beer fresh and they looked at it aged 2 months. You can look at flavor profiles from fresh to 2 months, see how some hops that might have been piney or citrusy, like over time, maybe one of the two flavors starts to dominate more. You can see like with Simcoe, how piney citrusy kind of stayed the same profile over time, whereas which one was, I believe it's Chinook, has piney citrusy notes, but over time the citrus kind of fades away and the piney notes kind of come more to the forefront. And there's other examples of that, but some interesting research on the hop front. And later that night was the Grand Bakewell Award ceremony. I don't know, I was exhausted, came home, got to do some writing. So thanks again to Ryan and Mike at West Coaster. Shout out to Jeff at San Diego Beer Vlog. He does the written version, beer blog I should say. Check out San Diego Beer blog, put the links down. If you want to know what's going on in San Diego, Jeff's got it covered, breaking news. such as what is Stone's new 5th anniversary beer. Talking about like some of the things I talked about with AleSmith, what that's going on. And congrats to Miss Steele. He is now the master brewer at Stone, taking over for Steve Wagner. He's going to have like a different role. What else is going on? Met some other people. Finally met my first like viewer that I didn't know in person. So that was pretty awesome. He recognized me there hanging out. And shout outs to everyone involved with West Coaster. Appreciate getting me some passes. This is a lot of fun. So until next time, cheers.